with our third podcast, and we have a special guest for these post first game of the season podcast, and that's Sanjo. Derek, how are you doing, Derek?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good.
Doing very good. Don't want to waste any time here because we've got a lot to talk about after this that interesting game last night, and I've got a lot of thoughts. But how about we just, Derek? Why don't you just give us your thoughts on what you saw?
Yeah. So one of the tricks for me, at least, when you come into the beginning of a season after a disappointing season, is you have all this built up angst over how things that disappointed you, right? And so you have all these sort of preconceived narratives, and it's easy to just, and all these rivalries develop on the boards and all that stuff, and it's easy to just sort of fit everything you see into those buckets. And I really tried this year, as I have in previous years, to just kind of wipe the slate clean and be like, you know what, this is a new team with, 30% new players, and we've had a lot of time. We brought in new recruits, yada yada yada. We've changed coaches. Let's just see it for what it is, and not try and make too much of anything I see. So I try to approach the first few games, from a real kind of macro perspective. So I wasn't looking at as much at stuff like is Whittick playing better than Kessler, or which of these guys is really outshining the other in the drama of the quarterback competition. I just wanted to see an offense with some flow and a defense with some aggressiveness. And we saw a little bit of one of those, but obviously not the other.
Derek, I've always been impressed by the remarkable level-headedness and restraint you show in posting. It's something I think we should all aspire to, because I tend to get so worked up over blatant stupidity, and yet you seem to stay level-headed about it. And I guess you're getting a JD MBA, and I would assume that there's probably a few people on the board who have that combination of degree. And how does that help you become such a reasonable guy when you're dealing with such morons?
Well, okay, so I don't know if the degrees help me deal with it. I think that my biggest aid is just the delete button, because I've written many angry posts. I've written long posts in response to stupidity and gotten to the end of it and said, this is not going to be productive. It was I got it out of me, and I don't need to post it. I don't need to call, X poster a jerk or a moron or anything like that, because that's not going to help anybody. And it's plain to see. If you've got a decent head on your shoulders, you can see that stuff, I think. And I don't know. I don't like to I try as much as I can to avoid getting dragged down to somebody else's level. You can see stuff now. There's just tons of posts today, even baiting people into argument. And I think I probably fall for it the majority of the time, but I try not to. I make a concerted effort not to do it. So I think just, the other thing I try to remind myself, too, is, I take this stuff way too seriously, and nobody else does or should. And at the end of the day, it's just recreation, and we're just kind of all rooting for the same thing, and we just have different conceptions of how that should be accomplished,
Right. Chase?
Well, I think it's pretty important, but that's just joking.
It's comfort food,
right? So I think maybe we can get into some of the details here of what exactly happened yesterday, because we did see some things on the defense which were, I thought, they're more than positive. They were fun to watch. I mean, it was fun to watch our defensive players actually go out and play real football and not just act like robots. But on the offense, I'm not even sure what is going through Lane's head at this point. It's almost as though this game and the Sun Bowl, it's almost as though it was a caricature of the critiques of the people have made about his offense. It's almost like he's trying to one up his prior shoebox performances by so limiting what areas of the field he's willing to attack.
Think I'm limiting myself? I'll show you.
Yeah, I mean that was my read of what a lot of what happened. So Derek, why don't you do the impossible, try to get inside Lane's head? What do you think is happening?
Yeah, okay, I'll do my best. So I think, you look at the roster, you look at, two new quarterbacks, and you've got this sort of slew of pretty talented running backs, but no, superstar. You've got a fair amount of experience coming back on the O-line, and you've got these two, I think, really good tight ends. So to me that says, let's ease our quarterbacks into this position, and let's run a lot. We're going to have to emphasize the run. We're going to be more physical and all that stuff, and we're going to take it easy on them, right? So you don't want to, I think we want to put them in a position to succeed, right? But in that effort, like as that play chart you posted, which like kind of captures it perfectly, shows you've taken away 70% of the field. Like you just the defense. They know kind of where you're going to throw it if you do throw, and then on top of that, they know how long they have to get to you. So, like, if you're only going to do 3-step drops and the occasional 5-step drop, why bother risking a lot on a blitz and getting burned if you're not going to take those shots?
And what's scary about that whole chart is that, I really think that the eval I did of Hawaii's defense tended to be pretty spot on. Their front seven was actually pretty solid. They had a pretty decent front line, and they had pretty good ends. And their middle linebacker, who was the guy I was really high on, had a really good game. He had 10 tackles and 4 tackles for loss, I believe, and I think he also had a sack or 2. But Hawaii's secondary was so bad, and USC just refused to take advantage of it. It's almost it's so befuddling for what the possible reasons could be for not taking advantage of a really weak secondary. And the only thing I could think of is that it's just an extreme aversion to risk. And
yeah. That's pretty much exactly where I come down to, because the school of thought I laid out that I think is what Lane's process is. The counter to that is, well, when are you going to open it up? I mean, you're going to wait till these guys have 4 years in the system, and then you'll finally let them take some shots downfield. I mean,
in the 5th year.
If there's a time to do it, it's now, when you have like kind of a weak opponent that you can recover from any major mistakes on offense. Like, help build their confidence and show them that you'll be aggressive with them and all that stuff. And it just sort of, I thought it was a little unfair to Kessler, because it made him look like a check down, or just like a guy who didn't have a big arm,
like Aaron Corp.
Like Corp, or like how Leinart is in the NFL. I mean, halfway through the game, I was trying to think of one pass that they made over the middle, and the chart showed there wasn't any. And it's just frustrating to watch, because we feel like we have the tools, and we just can't figure out how to use them to our greatest benefit. It's just watching talent get wasted. It's really frustrating to watch.
Yeah, well, it is admittedly counterintuitive to think that when you do make throws further downfield, that these are actually safer passes, more constructive passes for inexperienced quarterbacks. The intuitive thing would be, no, the shorter the pass, the less the risk. Therefore, we're going to introduce our quarterback with a number of short passes. The more we don't use the middle of the field, because defenses are located in the middle of the field, there are less players on the outside. The more that we throw to the outside, the less risk there is. But the problem is, in the actual practice of football, what happens is when you only use or only attack certain areas of the field, the areas of the field that you actually do attack end up getting cluttered with defensive players. And it is the phenomenon of taking 10 people and putting them in a small room and then trying to work within that space. And it is counterintuitive, but it's also pretty basic, and it's hard to believe that someone who's been so involved with the construction and coaching of offensive football for as many years as Lane, because he's not a young guy anymore, as many years as he's been at this, he can't figure out this rather basic proposition that if you only throw the ball within tight windows, it becomes increasingly difficult to complete passes, and it could increasingly difficult to make big plays because there's going to be more and more defenders stuck in smaller and smaller spaces. And yesterday with Kessler, I mean, it could not have been more glaring. I mean, and the chart shows that he throws. Finally, they let Marquise Lee run a dig route on that 45-second drill to end the half. Beyond that, he throws 2 passes downfield, both to receivers who are wide open. So it's frustrating. It embarrasses me as a USC football fan, and it makes Kiffin look like a out-of-touch buffoon.
You guys aren't coaches. You don't know what you're talking about. You've never played college football. You've never played pro football. You've never coached in the NFL or in college. What do you know? What do you guys know?
I know. I mean, if we held ourselves to the standards of what some of the persons think qualifies for a valuable opinion, there would be no message board. There would be nobody talking about anything.
Right.
The sound of one hand clapping.
Right. Not to mention the fact that if we're not qualified to critique, they're not qualified to compliment. So I mean, it goes both ways.
Well,
the weird.
Go ahead, Derek.
I was going to say, one of the weird things is, I don't want to put this into these broad categories, but from the Sunshine Pumper side, they are declaring the defense a great defense off of one game, and on the offense, though, they have the switch is flipped, and it's, we got to give it more time. I saw some good signs, and there's this and there's that, and you just need to be patient, but it's coming. It's going to be really good. But when you don't find the same mindset affecting the defense, it looked good, but it's a weak opponent, so let's give it a little bit of time and see what's going to happen down the road. It's weird.
It's only one game for the bad things. It's never one game for the good things, right? We played great. Well, no one ever says, it's only one game. We played great. We're great on that side of the ball. And then when it's the offense plays poorly, it's it's only one game. We're going to be fine. Don't read too much into it. And then the defense, we're great there. Read a lot into it.
Yeah, and you do these they do this mental gymnastics where it's if we combine the deep passing game we had from the Arizona game, and then the running game we had against Oregon State, combined with the pace we had against BYU in 2009. Oh man, what an offense! That is a useless point.
And then you always get the idea that if only certain passes had been caught or certain blocks had been made, basically, in other words, if only USC had played a flawless game and had not had the type of every team has some mistakes during the game. So if only USC had played flawless, they might have looked good against Hawaii.
Well, and obviously the other side of that is, the flip side is, they always want to take credit for the plays that we didn't make, but they never want to talk about the plays Hawaii didn't make. The overthrown pass that would have been a touchdown if it was just a decent pass. The one guy that couldn't break one tackle to get to the end zone. I mean, you could spin this 1,000 different ways, but the performance is what it is.
Yeah, and I want to ask one question to you, both you guys, and this is what I was thinking last night as I was watching the game. Do you think? Well, it's a 2-part question. The first part: do you think that if USC had lost that game, that Lane Kiffin would have been fired? And 2, do you think it probably would have been better if if USC had lost that game? I know that it's a taboo thing, but just looking from a purely what is good for the overall long-term health of this program. What do you think of those 2 questions?
Derek, I'll let you go first.
Okay. So I don't think he would have been fired if they had lost that game. Caden did a video saying he's not on the hot seat 5 weeks ago, and I think for almost that reason alone, he wouldn't have turned around and fired him after one game. I don't think he would make that kind of move, and I'm not sure really necessarily what the benefits of it are. So if you talk about the long-term health of the program, you gave a guy 3 years and one game, and you let him go right away when he loses to Hawaii. I don't know if it's nice to have that long amount of time, that much time to to look for your next coach, but it puts an interim guy in a weird position. It puts you in I think it feels like it puts you in a weird recruiting position. Big unknown for that long. It seems like that has a lot of compounding effects that aren't necessarily helpful. But if it's the kind of thing where, like, if we have Clancy as our interim coach in late November, I'm not going to be griping about it if we've had a bad season, because I think at that point we know what we've had. We've given this guy a really fair shot, and it's time to kind of move on. So that's kind of the time frame that I see is more beneficial to, if you're going to do an in-season fire, than doing it right at the beginning of the year.
I mean, I pretty much agree with that. I think the few things which I think Derek is 100% correct about. Even if we lost to Hawaii, I do not think Lane would have been fired today. Now, he could have been fired within the first 3 games because there could have been a complete collapse by the team. So you could have had a new head coach within September. I think that's a possibility that could have happened. And actually, to be honest, I still think there's still a possibility in my mind that we could collapse right away and lose the next 3 games. As crazy as that sounds, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I don't think it's going to happen, but there's a possibility for a collapse and certainly a coaching replacement by October.
I mean, if you watch that game, I don't see how anybody can say that it sounds ridiculous. I mean, I personally think that if Kiffin had lost that game, I think there would have been people with pitchforks outside Hayden's office on Monday morning. I had Alex Holmes call me and to gripe about the game, and the last time he griped about a game was when he was playing. He would usually call me after the game, after games, and say, what the fuck just happened? And that's what he said last night. He was like, "What the fuck? What the fuck just happened?"
Well, I think there might be people outside Hayden's office with pitchforks, but I don't really think that Hayden would do that video and then fire Lane Kiffin within 3.5 weeks of the video being.
I think he would say, "Look, we've seen what if you lose to Hawaii, what more do you need to see?"
Well, okay, look, I think we'll probably be going in circles on this question. The other part of it is, and Derek touched upon this, I do think if you get an interim coach too early in the season, you run the risk of getting forced into having to keep the interim coach, even though that's not really who you want. So this would be a real possibility, right? Lane gets fired before we get to the meat of Pac-12 play, and then Clancy takes over, and the team wins the Pac-12 South, something like that, and then has a surprise upset in the Pac-12 championship game. It goes to the Rose Bowl, something along those lines. I mean, it's a possibility. What happens to the interim coach at that point? I mean, do we have to hire Clancy as the full-time coach? I think I'd rather have the interim coach hired when it's clear this team is not going to be playing for some sort of major bowl game.
Right. I think it's key too to not be thinking of it as does he deserve to have this job or not? Because we're all pretty much on the same page when it comes to that. I thought he didn't deserve the job by the end of last season. But if you think of the question as, and I've posted about this many times, so I'm sorry for being repetitive, but if you think of the question as the overall health of the program, the timing of when you fire him takes on a different sort of color. It's really, okay, if I do it here, what choice am I making in 6 months, and where is the program in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? And that's sort of a different version of that question. So it's, hey, okay, he's done, but when do we do that, or when do we do it? And sometimes programs will wait half a season or whatever. They'll have they'll make the call right away. I think for the health of that seed, it is probably best to wait a little bit longer. Kind of for some of the reasons that Chase is talking about, is you don't want to be forced into like a Bill Stewart situation where it's this love story about this guy that is going to be awful in 3 years, but you're stuck with him because it's a great story.
I mean, I think there's ways to not be stuck with somebody if you state right away. But like you're right. I think this is something that we're trying to prove, something that we can't really prove.
What is the history of your username?
Okay, yeah. So I grew up in San Jose, and every time I ever went to like a Ryan's tailgates or anything like that, everybody would call me San Joe, and I always flash back to when I was picking the username, like in the 90s, thinking like, should I go San Ho with an H? But that's not the right spelling.
So it is. So it is San Ho, because I've been calling you that for more than a decade. I've secretly been calling you San Ho, but there's another certain member of the think tank who I will not name who said no, it's San Joe, which it didn't.
Well, yeah, but that's a basic courtesy. I don't want to call the guy a ho.
Right.
I actually, believe it or not, I wasn't talking about you. This was the one time I wasn't talking about you. But you can confirm to us today that it is San Ho.
I can, yes. All the people that actually would care about that, I can confirm to both of you that it is San Ho.
This is one of the longest raging controversies in USC.
The Hatfields and the McCoys.
Right.
This is like what happened to Toner and what is Super City's current username or handle?
Yeah, exactly. So I remember thinking, every time I got called Sanjo, which was by everybody, I would always flash back to, when I was picking this thing, I thought, no, people will get it, and nobody did. So it's like, well, whatever, I'm stuck with it.
Well, such are the ways of the internet. It's a rough and tumble world out there. It's a wilderness, and if you don't establish yourself early, you'll get eaten up.
Yeah, make eye contact and establish dominance. Right?
Exactly. So, what is your particular area of interest? I know that it seems like you early on you were tabbed by Gerard as the barometer for recruiting, which is a kind of an odd onus to have placed on your shoulders. But what is your specific interest with USC or football in general? What are the areas in which that really sort of intrigue you, or areas that you want to delve into further?
Yeah, so it sort of evolved for me. Like it used to be, it started off with, like in the early days, with just the team, and then it became, well, how does the team get constructed? And then I was obsessed with recruiting for like 7 or 8 years, and that sort of tapered off as just my life's gotten busier and I've had less time to dedicate to it. And one of the problems is like that knowledge of recruiting. I don't know how Gerard does it every year, but it's basically wiped clean for the next year. You don't know. You might look at a bunch of film on a guy and then he goes to Wisconsin, and it's like, well, that's useless knowledge now. It doesn't carry me forward at all. So what it's become more for me now is just from like the higher level stuff. I really like kind of seeing how coaching hires and decisions are made, the strategies that Kiff is or isn't, implementing, and kind of trying to think through the why or why not. I've kind of fallen in love with this idea of like looking at the program from from a business perspective, and like kind of like what you were alluding to earlier, Chris, was is Kiff being too risk averse? How do I think that he's approaching these like major strategic choices, and how he's like putting this product on the field? So I've kind of fallen in love with that stuff a little bit more. There's guys that are much better at it than I am. Like MB2 stuff is fantastic. But that's kind of the thing I've come to now is maybe the past couple of years.
Where do you fall on that question? Is just there's been look, you're getting your MBA, so you know a lot more about this than I do. But there's all these theories about how businesses get caught in inertia, and how and decisions are just made based upon individual past experiences. Do you think Lane has? It's kind of a loaded question, but do you think that's what's going on here?
I think the reason Lane's even the coach at SC is because of inertia. I think, you look at who we hired and who we were considering bringing on with them, and it looked like, let's just keep this thing going. This is what worked for us before, and it was that this kind of continuity hire that has some logic behind it. But I thought it was one of those like, well, we know that he was here when we were really good, so maybe he'll keep us being really good. And I don't know. I guess even to go back a step further, not trying to dodge the question, but like even in the Carroll years, I thought we saw a lot of examples of hubris when he was hiring one after another offensive coordinator who had no experience in the position. was a really troubling sign to me. I thought, he was surrounding himself with people who were kind of telling him what he wanted to hear, and he had earned himself into that position. But when you had these sort of troubling either losses or just underperformances, it felt like there was definitely some erosion going on internally, and I think we've seen that, that trend continue over the past, 4 or 5 years. The program was already kind of eroding a little bit in terms of quality of coaching and quality of the product on the field, consistent performances and all that. And then once he was gone, you didn't have that sort of safety net with Carroll at the top, and we almost flipped the model where the safety net now was supposed to be the assistant coaching staff with all these years of experience, and they were supposed to basically be the training wheels for Kiffin to help kind of usher him into growing into being a head coach. And I just don't think that's a very good way to construct a program. It's not like you don't see it. That's not the type of model that many other programs do. I mean, other than Tennessee when they hired Kiffin, I can't even think of another off the top of my head.
And that went really well.
Yeah. I mean, it's 1 year, so what can you do? But it's not a great sample size. But just knowing Hamilton's record as an AD, it's probably not a great.
So what do you think about the theory? It's actually a theory I've kind of thought about. Probably not enough to fully flesh out, but it's my theory that Lane Kiffin. One reason he's still the coach at USC is that he's such an isolated character in college football. It makes him eminently fireable at any moment, in the sense that Pat Hayden theoretically could say that Lane Kiffin did something that merited firing, and even if it wasn't true, Lane Kiffin no one would believe Lane Kiffin's protests. He has such little credibility outside of, or with the media or with anybody who has opinions on that. No matter when Pat Hayden fires Lane Kiffin, he will be seen as having some sort of justifiable cause for it. Because there's really, outside of Colin Cowherd, I can't really think of anybody in the media who is theoretically going to stick up for Kiffin when that day comes. And so I think having that sort of knowledge in the back of his mind that it will be seen as a smart move no matter what, I think Pat Hayden didn't mind having him in place, in the sense that maybe he didn't have the guy who he wants to replace him with yet. So therefore, sort of keeping a guy who is completely fireable is a way to sort of pave the way for somebody better.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure if that's. I wouldn't put it that way. I'd say that I think Hayden is probably most invested in the perception that he's being fair, right? And I think you'd have to have blinders on to think that the media is not going to embrace this villain Lane Kiffin getting let go, whenever if that happens. So I think that's something that's going to be to his benefit either way, whether he does it now, whether he does it tomorrow, whether he does it in 6 months or whatever. So knowing that that's the fact, I actually don't think that's much of a factor. I think maybe this is being really naive and I'm giving Hayden too much credit, but I think it really comes down to what's in the best interest of the program. I think we can probably get a better coach next year if we give him another year's worth of opportunity. Maybe, based on Hayden's coaching searches so far, maybe he thought he was set at head coach for a while, and he wasn't really when the season really, you could tell it was really bad at the end of last year, and he was going to have to make if he was going to fire him, he was going to have to make a decision in 2 months. Maybe he wasn't prepared to make a decision that would have ramifications for 4 or 5 years on the program in that short of a window.
Right.
So knowing that he took a year to figure out who to replace O'Neal with, maybe he feels like he needs a long lead time before he can make a call on the most visible and prestigious position at SC.
Right. Chase?
Sorry, having problems with the mute button there. So I want to explore another corporate social behavior theory or something along those lines, if I can, Derek. What about the idea that Lane has conflicting motives at this point, or that his motives are not necessarily completely congruous with his best interests are not completely congruous with USC's best interests, and this is what I mean by that. I think Lane has to, or you would think he's in the back of his mind, he's thinking, what happens to me if I lose this job? So this is like corporate management, the corporate manager thinking, what is my next step? And one of the consequences of that is that he's unwilling to forego what he views as one of his greater assets in the marketplace, which is his reputation for being an offensive guru. And there's different consequences to this. One is he won't hire his own offensive coordinator. Another is that he won't really experiment with the offense that he's already had over time, because that will kind of be a demonstration or a concession that the offense had problems. So his best interests aren't necessarily completely aligned with ours. What do you?
Well, I think any head coach's interests aren't always aligned with the program. I mean, the idea is that they are best aligned. You hope you have a guy who's committed to being a college football coach forever, but a lot of these guys have starry eyes, and no matter what head coach we have, there's going to be one of them might, if they were going to give you an honest list of their top 5 jobs, SC might not be at the top of that job, and if Bama or Ohio State came calling, they might jump at that opportunity. You just never know, right? Or the
mute button, Chase.
Sorry, go.
Chase, put the mute button on. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I think it's an interesting theory. I just don't completely buy it because, I think if he is really thinking he's got a reputation as an offensive guru, I think that's wildly overestimated. And then also, I'm not sure what we're seeing.
Just one second. I mean, Derek, he could be wrong. That might not be the case that he has this great reputation, but he could be mistaken about that.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm with you on that. But I don't think what we're seeing, though, like maybe, it's more of I'm going to do this my way. I'm going to go out my way if I have to go. Maybe that's what you're kind of saying. But I think what we're seeing with the offense, though, is it's sort of like you get in this high-stress situation, and when you get stressed, you start gripping too hard. What that ends up doing is exacerbating the situation and accelerates his departure. I think that's kind of what we're seeing is he looked to me on the sidelines yesterday. I mean, I don't want to read too much into sideline demeanor, but he looked to me yesterday like a guy who was very stressed and feeling the burden of, high expectations, a lot of moving parts, and, a lot of people that are pretty much, they're teed up to hate him. I mean, even if we don't lose and we're 5-6 teams into this season, and we've just had disappointing performances, I think we're seeing a Coliseum that's like half to 3/4 of the way full. Well, that's not going to be good.
What about, I was thinking about this idea of who is Lane Kiffin, what are Lane Kiffin's best interests? Another question is, who is he trying to impress? And by that I mean, everyone has, all these coaches have some sort of aesthetic mentality to what they're trying to do. I remember talking to Pete, and there's no doubt about it that he was always trying to impress Monty with what he was doing defensively. He was always trying to show that he was a worthy disciple of Monty Kiffin. And I think that Lane, one reason why he might stick to what he does so much is that the people that he respects the most when it comes to offense are people in the NFL and people who aren't doing things in college that are innovative and spread out and all that. So I think the reason he sticks to what he does is because he's trying to show that he can do that and trying to show these people that, he is, an NFL offensive coordinator. Those are the people whose accolades he's trying to get. I think, not necessarily in a sense that, outward accolades or, hey, you did good in the offseason when someone sees you, but more like just to kind of have that respected role as an NFL mind.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I mean, I think there's probably some truth to that. I think a really underestimated component, particularly by the fans, is that he's never had to go to New Hampshire and develop an offense with like nothing athletes against. At that point it's like a stock car race. It's just everybody has mediocre athletes, and you have to develop a strong philosophy and an implementation program to get these pieces kind of working together and what results on the field in your tactics are a result of a much larger philosophy that impacts like choices that you make, 2 or 3, choices ahead of what's the play that's actually called, right? Is you've developed a strength and conditioning program that's this way, or you've done a you've recruited this kind of athlete or what have you. And I think because he hasn't been forced to like earn the way up the ladder on his merits, that I think he thinks he has it already. And so that creates, I think, a less malleability in what he's deciding to do, because I feel like he only knows one way and one path, and that's his comfort level, and that's just kind of what he's sticking to. Like I look at what we saw yesterday, and not to overestimate one game, but it looks like to me like that's a guy that didn't ask the right questions in the offseason. He didn't ask the hard philosophical questions of, if I was starting a program today, what choices can I make? I'm going from a page one rewrite. How am I going to start this whole thing off, and how is that going to affect every decision down this decision tree?
He's still looking at it like the guy's going to get the girl at the end.
I mean, yeah, I'm not sure what that means, but
no, I'm just saying he's painting by numbers, right? He's still doing the standard script in his mind. He's still sticking to his script. He can never write Memento. You know what I mean? He's always writing, at the regular Adam Sandler movie.
Right. Yeah. So he's sticking to his formula, and I think he's focusing on tactics and not strategy. And I think part of that is because he was given a position way beyond his what he had earned at that point, and he's never been forced to develop it. I think when you've got it's just normal life when you have a manager who's been promoted for the first time and they're overseeing people. They stick to their comfort level in most cases because that's what they know. But what their comfort level is deciding things that are now below their pay grade. And Kiff's been above that, at this position for a while, but I think he's still looking at decisions through the prism of a lower pay grade, and it's just not. It's not like what you see out of a really elite head coaches, and it just doesn't look like the DNA of a guy who's even is or will become an elite head coach, and that's what we all really want.
Yeah, well, as far as when it comes to like one of these true, candid self-examination, let's forget about everything, all my preconceived notions. Let me go and examine everything I believe. I don't know if Lane is constitutionally capable of doing that. He certainly does not have the kind of the foundation to do that. He was other than maybe a season or two under in Fresno State as a grad assistant. I mean, his only real experience as an assistant coach was on Carroll's staff, and Norm Chow was the offensive coordinator. So that was like the only true functioning offense he ever had to participate in a meaningful way. Yes, I'm sure he spent hours and hours and hours during the summer hanging out with John Gruden and a group of 10 other guys, listening to Gruden spout off about his offensive philosophies. But that's a lot different than actually having to put those philosophies into practice. And the sum total of his experiences was really one coach, and that was Chow. And he's now spent more years as a head coach on his own than he ever spent as an assistant to Chow, kind of cutting his teeth. So he's one of these guys that was promoted far too quickly, far too young, and it's kind of doubtful that he'd ever be able to get to the place where he can start all over again and start really thinking about what's going on, because anyone who really spends a lot of time thinking about football, thinking about offensive strategy and the way that offenses are successful and all the elements that contribute to that, they don't go out and go to Honolulu and throw 19 out of 22 passes right at the sideline. That's not the way it works. So I don't know if Lane's not going back to the drawing board. This is probably it for him.
Yeah, probably. I mean, the writing's coming on the wall. I mean, if you compare him to a guy like Chip Kelly, you see, it's not. I think what Kiffin sees when he looks at Chip Kelly is, here's a guy who's running a lot of plays, right? But to me, what you see from Chip is it's a greater philosophy, right? It's probably something like we're going to be better conditioned than every team. We're going to put even if they're superior athletes, we're going to put them in high stress positions where they have to make mental decisions quickly, and they have to do it over and over and over again. And if we can do, 10, 20% more plays than any other team, then they're going to make, that many more mistakes, and we're going to be able to capitalize on those mistakes. So we don't need elite athletes. We don't need that. If we can execute this vision, then we can just from the philosophical implementation of my philosophy, we're going to have an advantage.
Yeah, I just think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I think that actually Kiffin. I think how he looks at Chip Kelly is how the Rock Band journey might have looked at REM when they were first coming up as like a cool little college rock band or something like that. He sees him as like a cool little guy, but it's not real football. Like that's not really. It's great that they put up all these points and yards, but it's still like that whole thing where people still call this a gimmick, even though 90% of the country is running some version of the spread, and the true gimmick is now what USC runs. It's this clinging to this mentality that what he's doing is kind of real football, and even though he may respect what Chip Kelly does offensively, I don't think he sees what Chip Kelly does as real football. I think he sees it as a cop-out, maybe a cop-out, the fact that it's what you do when you don't have talent. And so what I'm going to do is, since we have talent, we don't have to run that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think pride. There's a lot of pride in USC's DNA, and I think that extends to like the athletic department and just the university at large. And I agree. I went 11 rounds with like Goo and that whole group over Chip Kelly when he was an offensive coordinator, and I was advocating the position that this is a new type of offense, and we haven't seen anything like that. And he's doing this with mediocre athletes. And when he started doing it with Masoli, I said, this is a guy who looks like a fullback, and he's running this offense really effectively. When he starts getting the guys into this system that he wants and that we can really run it really well, it's going to take off. Because then you have the combination that we always want, which is you've got a great philosophy, a great scheme, and great athletes all combined together, and you have a huge advantage, which is what SC had in that like 03, 04 time period. And then we started to lose it at 05, and now we're just trying to athlete everybody. And that's not going to work. You have to, kind of like you guys are saying, you have to fit balls into these tiny windows, and the level of difficulty to execute just your base offense becomes so much harder. And it all comes back to, I agree with you guys, it all comes back to this kind of prideful position that we're not going to run a gimmick. But who cares about the label gimmick if it works and gives you an advantage? I don't care what you call it.
Well, it's just like the whole thing where people on the piece say, well, we need to run the ball. Yards are yards. I understand the idea that wearing people down and all that, but there are different ways to wear people down. I just think that just like those French generals refighting World War I in the 30s, I feel that's a little bit what a lot of people on the peristyle are like, and some people who are coaching this football team.
Yeah, the other thing too is, you really can't, for some fans, I don't think they can separate that SC and their head coach are different entities, and rooting for USC's the best thing for USC doesn't mean you're always rooting for the head coach. If we put it this way, if Kiffin were to win 10 games this year and then fall off a cliff, but we sign him to like a 5-year deal and it costs us a bunch of money, and we're in a worse position in 3 years because of that, then and the opposite is he loses or he wins 6 games, we get rid of him, we're in a much better position down the line. Then to me, the proper thing to root for is the second option, where we are better off. Because I'm all about like long-term health of the program, and this to me seems like we are finally going to get a clean break between like the Carroll era, and we're going to start something new. And I think for most programs, you need that intermediary. You don't want to be like, no coach wants to be the guy after the guy. You want to be the guy after the guy after the guy.
Right.
Now you don't have to follow a legend, and now you have kind of people are looking at a new head coach as a breath of fresh air. So I think if this season goes like we're thinking, we're going to be it tees up very nicely to bring in a new head coach that can implement their system like across the board.
I want to get your guys' predictions on something, which we'll have to review at some point in the future. Assuming we, for whatever reason it happens, we do have a new head coach to start next season. What is going to be the general consensus of your typical parastyler about Lane Kiffin.
He who shall not be named.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable to me. I mean, I was dying to get rid of Hackett within halfway through the first season, him being a head coach, and these people certain people on boards defended him to death to the very end. And then all of a sudden he who shall not be named. I always suspected the reason he can't be named is because they were defending him and they didn't want to think about all the nice things they said about him.
Of course.
So the question is, why don't you guys try to forecast what will people say about Lane Kiffin if he's not the head coach next year?
I think they're going to say he tried, and that he gave it his Trojan best. And, it just wasn't the right fit. And if he wasn't, if he was given more time, and more chances, he would have got the job done. And he's a very talented guy. But that just didn't work out. And
so you think they're going to defend it? It's not going to be like Hackett. You think they will defend him almost like a sweeter version of Robinson too?
Well, there'll be a few that are going to be like. It's so funny. It's almost exactly like a situation with trying to subjugate a country, where you're trying to completely create a monopoly of force and take over a country, and you have the people who are still resisting, and they hold out as long as they can until it's clear who's winning, and then as many as possible will switch over to the winning side just before. The cataclysm happens, and I think 90% of them will switch over just in time to say, there might be a quick you were right all along, and now I hate Kiffin, or I hate Kiffin without acknowledging that people have been saying this for a long time. There will be 2 or 3. I can't foresee Dallas 420 or Element 720, or God, it feels so weird just saying those names, but. I can't imagine those guys actually reneging on everything they said.
What do you think, Tarek?
Yeah, I pretty much agree. There's it's interesting. There's this weird transition phase. At least we went through this with Hackett, where people are defending him, and then once the decision is made, it's the reaction was more that I recall was more silence than anything else. It's so nobody wants to give credit to somebody they've been arguing against for 3 years.
Totally.
So it's kind of silence, and then after a while you kind of sneak in and you start talking about, look at how great things are going now, or whatever.
Oh, that's actually happening. There's a few people who've already, I think Trojby, he made his jump 6 months ago, and Beat Irish is making his move now.
Beat Irish is making. He's the one, I think. He and maybe Wilson. Is it Wilson, JB, or JB Wilson? The two of them are the ones that are most clearly, more than inching. They're getting very, and even Real Conquest, you can kind of see some people are so entrenched. There's that Cryptia post today about.
Look, there are some who are trying to go the fabled third way, which would be anti-Kiffin and anti-Kiffin. Those are definitely, these would be it's like during the Cold War, the people who hated both the communists and the anti-communists, and wanted to kind of play both off against each other. And I think there's a few of those guys, I guess 5'11" and Thor Curry, who will try to say, he'll just to make sure that he can save himself later. He'll say, I'm not happy with Kiffin either, but. So I think there's a lot of those guys.
I had to keep those people in check. The Kiffin haters, they're so out of control. I just had to keep them in check. I didn't really believe what I was saying.
Well, and then once the decision's made, there's always this I'm let's just look forward. I don't care about rehashing things of the past. But you said this 3 weeks ago, and you want to talk about how great who the new coach is or how great they're going to do, and it's look, pal, let's have a little bit of let's have a little bit of intellectual honesty here, and I'm not going to drag you through the mud, but let's just talk through, and so we have a better understanding of why like we had this disagreement, and what I think we all saw, maybe we can kind of come to an understanding. But nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, and I also hate how there's that whole like it's your tone. It's not what you say; it's how you say it, and you're repetitive, and you say it too much, and you're not constructive when you say it, and it's like when someone has to talk about your tone, and you themselves usually using a very distinct tone, it feels like the argument's way past beyond one. Nevertheless, Ryan seems to hold a lot of credence with things like, if you say you don't like Kiffin more than twice, you're being too repetitive. And
right, it's repetitive. It's very selective enforcement of being repetitive.
Sure, you can hate, you can harp on Pat Hayden in every war room, and that's not repetitive.
Right.
And you come up with wild conspiracy theories about what's going on.
Right. When we first started the think tank, I was kind of itching to do, because one of my big things about the think tank is that there's going to be every single post we're ever do is going to be archived, permanent record. That's it. You can't just say something and then a year later or 2 weeks later you never said it, like it's on the peristyle.
Right.
And initially, what I wanted to do so badly was I was like, well, maybe we should start keeping records of who's saying what on the peristyle. And Jake 2K2, I think, rightly said, or it just took the high ground and said, this sounds a little bit too much like the Stasi or something.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you guys, I've been staring. I mean, you'd see how many freaking posts I've made. I've been on these boards for years thinking, like, it would be nice if there was an exclusive board for just the people that kind of, like, not even the people that think alike, but just the people that think, or like think through a lot of what they're saying. And as soon as I got over the board and maybe been on it for like a couple weeks, was like, God damn it, why didn't I have this idea myself? It was right in front of me every day. So I love what you guys have put together. I echo, I can't remember who posted it on the tank, but I echo their thoughts about thank you guys for putting it together, because I find myself going over there and just valuing the conversation that's being had over there much more than even the Paris.
There's one thing I really have to ask, and that is, what is up with your sig pics? There's on your you have a rather that's not you, is it?
No, God,
okay.
No.
So you have a rather brusque.
Sorry, you're a very handsome man, Derek.
Very brusque looking guy, and then even in your Skype, there's a kind of a monster kind of guy. So what's the story behind your various gravatars?
Okay, so I actually forgot that I had that signature until I think it was even like yesterday or today. I undid it. I forgot that I had You're talking about the guy with the shirt that says "sex" on it.
Or the guy with the pirate hat on.
Yeah, that guy.
The pirate.
Yeah, the guy who looks like a younger version of Haas from Bonanza.
I don't even know which one that is. Well, there's not a great story behind it. But so basically on Facebook, I do the same thing. I just don't post pictures of myself, and I just try and find something that's funny that either makes me laugh or makes a friend laugh, and I just use that as my avatar because like my face isn't that interesting, so I'll just come up with something else to make people either laugh or make myself laugh or whatever. So there's no.
Got it.
I'm not embarrassed of my face. I just enjoy that more.
Got it.
All right. Well, it's been a great podcast. I think we probably should wrap up because I don't want to go over 2 hours. But Eddie, so let's just do some final thoughts. Chris, you have any final thoughts?
Well, I think that the bright side of this horrible loss is that I think each week people are seeing more and more evidence that there really has to be a change made at USC. And people think that I'm cavalier about this, but it's just one of those things where I've known about this guy for so long, and it was like to have him be named the head coach at USC. I was driving on I actually heard the news. I still remember I was driving on an off ramp on the freeway, and I almost veered off the road because it was so out of left field. And from the beginning, I knew deep down that it was going to end poorly. And it looks like we're in the sort of the death rattle right now. And I just wish that people would be honest with themselves and honest with what they're seeing. And it's a little bit frustrating, but I really think there's a good chance that this Washington State game at the Coliseum could be a watershed game. If not that game, then the Utah State game, because it's going to be in front of the home crowd. And it reminds me of the Hackett year where that seminal moment when you just knew that there was just the point of no return for Hackett, which was when there was like 15 guys on the field at once during a punt, during a punt. I think Cal, the Homo game where they kept trying to, the Cal was going to punt and then they weren't and then they were, and then USC was trying to shift their units off the field, and at one point there was like 18 guys in the field and they got called, and I think at that point, like, the crowd, you can almost hear, like, again, it was like the Walter White scene in the crawl space scene in Breaking Bad, where you just start laughing. It's so bad you just start laughing, and I think when it gets so bad that you just start laughing, that's when things that's when things are done. And I think that's so bad. I started laughing a long time ago, and I think the laughter is getting louder amongst a lot of people.
Well, on that cheery note, Derek, you have...
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overestimate the loss, because it's the loss. It's a win, but it felt like a loss.
It's a Freudian slip there. But...
Right. I don't want to overestimate the one game, but Kiffin does start off seasons really bad. I mean, if we'd played a good team, like a solid team in the first 3 games of pretty much every season Kiffin's been our head coach, I think we would have lost. I mean, He just starts off seasons really poorly. So, maybe he can get a little bit of momentum going. I mean, it happened in the second half of 2011. So I don't think it's like I don't think it's 100% that we're going to finish the season. He's going to be gone. I think he's got a chance to recover it. But I sort of see the same season unfolding here, is that, apathy, I think, is going to set in with the fans really quickly, which will, I think it'll probably set in with the team. I think there is probably, if I was going to bet on it, I'd say the same thing, that there's going to be some sort of watershed moment. I was talking to a buddy of mine yesterday during the game, and I said, this looks like a team that is going to get blown out at some point this season. It might be a good team like Stanford, or it might be just an okay team like one of the Arizona teams. But it feels like, to me, we are going to have that moment where it's just, wow, we lost by 30 points to this either unranked or low ranked team that we have more talent than, and it's just like there's no getting around it. I think that's the kind of moment where we all kind of go, all right, well, we know what's going to happen. We know the next the next 3 moves on the chessboard are going to be, it's just when they happen. So I sort of unfortunately see the same thing happening this season. I hope it doesn't go like that. I hope he turns it around and he's the greatest coach ever, and we do gangbusters recruiting. But everything else that I know about the guy and like just my own my way I apply my own logic tells me that that's not going to be the case. So hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be.
Yeah, I guess I'll wrap it up and say I think Lane has more than just the fact that we look so kind of sloppy and taking the air out of the fan base. The other kind of part to that is that we're just kind of boring to watch, especially on offense. It's excruciating at times, and it's that boredom that I think is going to help be the death knell just as much as losses. I mean, I actually think we could go 9-4 possibly. I don't think we probably will, but we could go 9-4. I could still see us Lane getting fired or not getting his contract renewed, just because our team is just so uninteresting to watch. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But Derek, I really appreciate having you on. You've been great, and we'll try to get you on. I know you got this crazy schedule, but we'll try to get you on very soon once again.